Hello and welcome to Cage Fighting. It's your main man Andy Gillard here. Hope everyone is keeping well in the world right now.
Hi buddy, Matt Guy here. Thank you very much for being with us this Monday or whenever you're listening to this.
Yeah, good morning, good evening, hello everyone, which seems to be my new catchphrase. If you've listened to my One Piece over the other podcast, actually, that would be a point though. I wonder if we did put a survey out, who actually listens at what time of day? I mean, we know there's a certain amount of people listen first thing in the morning, like the super fans, but like for normal, sensible people who wake up in the afternoon, do they leave it until the next day or do they listen as is?
Whenever I've looked, I mean, I don't look as regularly anymore at like the numbers, but we do seem to get like a bit of a jump on a Wednesday/Thursday. So I do think we have people who might save it for a little bit later in the week, which is very much goes against how I do things because it's literally I have to listen to it first thing or it gets put to the wayside.
It does depend though, because if you've got a certain, I was going to say a set period of time, but our podcasts are never a set period of time.
No.
But if you have got like a block, like say you go, I don't know, if you go jogging on a Wednesday, which God forbid, and that is your weapon of choice, then maybe that makes some kind of sense, because I used to listen to Knockback when I used to take Corey to the Wacky, and that was like 2 or 3 hours, and that podcast was a long time. So that, even though it came out like the Tuesday, I would save that for a couple of days because I knew that length of time would be passed while he was in there playing with the balls. So it makes some kind of sense.
Yeah, I get you. Matt, I think the fans need to know, did your jeans survive the afternoon with Johnny Phillips?
The jeans did survive. However, the interview segment was relatively short and I was stood up. My legs were not akimbo. So I don't think it would have mattered either way unless I had a dramatic amount of male camel toe, which could have happened, I suppose. They did. And now I am the recipient of some lovely Primark jeans, if you take away the ethical and sustainability issues that comes with that. I'm now crotch safe again for the world.
Can we use that commentary? Can we put it at the end as like a bonus, or was it like copyrighted?
I don't think my commentary of going Wolves are a shambles. I don't think that's copyrighted, but I'll wait till it comes out. We'll talk about it again when the piece comes out on Sky Sports, and we'll do it then.
Yeah.
Do we have a drop date for when it's due?
No, because I spoke to Johnny Phillips, friend of the show, and he was basically saying after the international break they'll put it together and do bits and bobs of it. So I had a bit of time, but it's going to be really interesting because they interviewed fans that use the service. So for anybody that doesn't know, I commentate for the visually impaired and the blind in the ground at Molineux, and they interviewed the people that use the service. So I think it'll be quite a very humbling experience to hear them talk about it. And they interviewed Laura, who's the I'm sure her exact title, like Disability and Inclusion Officer, I think it is. Yeah. And she's incredible. She does so much at Wolves. At her head, and her job list is non-exhaustive as well. It's like there's so much that she does. And they interview her, and then they interviewed us, and then they'll use our audio clipped over the actual footage of the game, but they'll put the two together and play that live and stuff like that. So yeah, it's gonna be good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm just worried that I'm gonna end up looking like a Thunderbird because I was very stood up straight and smiling, looking dead, looking at Johnny Phillips, making sure I don't have my Forrest Whitaker slightly closed eye that I have. And I was like, I'm worried I'm going to be like that, like I'm on coke, yes, Johnny Phillips.
Her title is Disability Access Officer, the safeguarding lead, Laura Wright.
Yes, she's great.
Excellent person.
Mm. So from one excellent person to another, I guess, that's the segue. We're doing our actor special. Originally, I did think we probably should do Keanu Reeves because John Wick 4 is out. But Matt did point out that he probably wouldn't know enough of the films. And when I looked at the list, when you get away from The Matrix, John Wick and Bill and Ted, I probably agree with you. I don't think I've got enough of a knowledge of some of the lesser known Reevesian movies.
Yeah, there's only so much I can talk about The Devil's Advocate.
Oh,
Constantine.
the Devil! I'd forgot about Devil's Advocate. Yeah, Constantine, which was not a good film, but apparently we're getting a
Speed.
sequel.
There's a
That's
subgenre
two straight away.
that I think deserves more love, and that's films about Satan from the 90s, which basically End of Days, The Devil's Advocate. There's got to be others as well. Stigmata,
South
like
Park.
South Park.
Yeah, South Park. Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
think there's a genre there that needs to be explored further. There's got to be some niche podcast about it, hopefully.
I remember at the time thinking that The Devil's Advocate was like a masterpiece, and then watching it again a few years later, like, wow, this is bad. This is really, really bad. It's very much like the cusp of when Pacino went from being a good actor to just being a shouty actor, I think.
Which one's the one where the kid's wearing the Hail Satan t-shirt who rides a skateboard and then he makes him crash into a bus? It's either End of Days or The Devil's Advocate. I think it might be the End of Days.
It's been so long since I've seen either. I can picture the scene. I can't put it in either film though.
It's the one. There's one where I'm sure it's End of Days where he ends up sleeping with the daughter and the mom, and they mesh into one person, like something out of American Gods
And Colour Out of Space.
and Colour Out of Space.
Yeah. That was a wild time in cinema. Absolutely horrific. But yeah, Tom Hanks is why we're here. Ultimately, we moved over to Tom Hanks. So we've got 12 questions to discuss on him. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to change the order on the questions, because the last question I put really is more like a hot take corner type of question than it is anything else. So I think really we should start with that one. So Tom Hanks has been quite vocal about the Nepo baby issue that seems to have reared its head in Hollywood over the last few years. He said that they have a drive to succeed, and also it's just them continuing in the family business. If Tom Hanks was a plumber, for example, all of the kids would have been expected to have helped out in his plumbing business. Is this fair of him to say, or is this just Hanks covering himself for criticism for casting his own kids in movies? Stu, do you have an issue with Nepo babies?
Not in principle, no. I mean, I think everyone can see. I mean, it's not like you just said, like the plumber, like the scaffolder, like the Wright and Sons hardware shop. It doesn't. It's not one of them things. Oh yeah, the kid's fucked up. Oh, we'll take the blame. It doesn't matter. If you're on the screen and you're an actor and you're shit, people are going to see that you're shit. So, in this point of view, I ain't got a problem with it, because eventually they're going to get found out, and they're not going to. The studios will lose money, which is in the end of it all what really counts, really. But I think it's when they get a leg up in place of someone else who deserves it more at the start. I think that's where you're going to draw, where the issue's going to come. But how are you ever going to prove that? It's like one of them things. It's like today I watched. I mean, this is how bad it was. I watched Forest Green Rovers against Sheffield Wednesday this afternoon, and Charlie Savage was playing up front for Sheffield Wednesday with Robbie Savage in the crowd. And I think, well, okay, fair enough. He actually does seem a decent player, but would he be getting that kind of leg up through Savage, who wasn't a wonderful player anyway? He's obviously got a foot in the door, so to speak, literally, in this case, because of who his dad is. But in that case, it's turned out to be a decent player, same as Dean Windas's kid. But for all of them like that follow on, like Alex Bruce, not the same as Steve Bruce, not as good.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone can see it. It develops over time. I think it's the initial part that's slightly annoying, but you're never going to stop it. So it doesn't bother me so much. It's just when people try and lie about it, say, "Oh yeah, he's going to be the groundbreaking actor or actress or whatever because of their heritage and it's bred in them." Well, no, not necessarily. Sometimes these things skip a generation. We've seen that before, and like it's the grandson of or the granddaughter of. So proof is in the pudding is the films, and if they humiliate themselves on screen, then the parents look a dickhead as well. So for me, I ain't got a problem with it, but it's a bit shitty for people who miss out because of it.
Mm-hmm. Matt, does the cream rise to the top in these situations, or does shit float? Like, where's the line between these things? Does Tom Hanks's kid automatically get a role over somebody else? Is that deserving, or where do you stand on the situation?
Well, deserving, no, but by sheer association of star power equals ratings as well. A nobody named actor and a Hanks child actor, purely on paper, one of those is going to generate more interest than the other. So that has to be factored in when you're thinking of money. Just as, like Stu rightly said, studios have one thing and that on their mind, and that's profit. At the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a bit of a non-issue personally, because this happens in all major industries of fame, music, sport. It's par for the course. It's expected. The thing that would be wrong about it is then if people get given passes for shit performances, then because, but then that would go that we look at it as a negative, but imagine then all the pressure on those individuals because they're Tom Hanks's children or because they're Francis Ford Coppola's. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Would Nick Cage have been given the roles he had if he hadn't have been, the relative of the Coppola family? Do you know what I mean? I think we have to look at it not so much as the opportunities that people haven't been given, but their star value because of the lineage that they've come from will have an impact as well. And it happens in wrestling, it happens in music, it happens in sport. Like, it's not a surprise. Like, until you mentioned it, I'd never even heard of it as a thing, and I was amazed at like people going so wild about it. But as we'll talk about in the rest of this podcast, some people like to make much ado about nothing.
I mean, it just reminded me then when you said about wrestling and sport. There's one that screams from the pit lane, so to speak, in F1. You've had a guy who's the son of probably one of the most famous people on the planet for the last 30 years, and when he's the son of someone who's won the world championship, who is now hasn't got a drive because he was so bad for so many years. He's now a reserve driver. Mick Schumacher. Have you even heard of Mick Schumacher?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You are right, though. I mean, it's one thing to get given the ball, but you've still then got to run with the ball. And if you're not good enough, you're not going to make it to the touchdown, are you, in those terms? So just because Tom Hanks's kid might have been cast in, his latest film, for example, that doesn't mean that kid is then going to get cast in the next film and the next film and then get given a franchise at the end of it. You've got to be good enough to get it. And like any business, you occasionally need a leg up. And is it fair? No. Is that life? Yeah. Like, it's tough shit, unfortunately, that you just have to grind it out. And I do think that if you're an actor, even if you are a no-name, if you're good enough and keep going, you will eventually get a break, and you have to be there to seize it. And I think it does work also for the Nepo babies. I do think that they might get more chances, but they need to be able to take them in order to build a career out of it. So I do think what he said was fair, to be honest, because whether it's in private industry, in public industry, show business, or, sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it, it's going to happen. It's just the way of the world, and you need to be mentally resilient enough to power through these things. Moving on to the next question. So we'll start off with, what was the first film of Tom Hanks's that you remember seeing? Matt, can you remember what the first film was?
I can't categorically say if it was big, so I think it must have been Toy Story. And yeah, at that time, it was what it was, wasn't it? Like the height of technology and like a visual spectacle like you'd never seen before, and it hits that sweet spot that we love in animated films where you have gags for the kids and then gags for the adults, and it was just timeless, isn't it? Toy Story, especially the first one, and then as things go on, it's kind of moved with its audience. It wasn't never made. It's like the latest films almost haven't been made for kids; they've been made for the adults that watch the original. And so, yeah, I think Toy Story. If I had to categorically say,
yeah. Stu, do you remember what your first dally with Hanks was?
It was the two that Matt mentioned, or Turner and Hooch. I've got a feeling it was Turner and Hooch because I remember watching it with my nan, and she died before Tomb Raider, before Toy Story came out. So
right,
it's one of them. Obviously, I had no real recollection of it, but I remember it being on. And looking at it, it came out in '89. It would have been on telly in the early '90s, you presume. So I'm guessing it was Turner and Hooch.
Yeah, I've got down Turner and Hooch for mine as well. I know I've seen Big, but I can't guarantee it was before Turner and Hooch. And I remember seeing Turner and Hooch at the cinema. So yeah, '89. I think I'd have been about
of course
6-ish.
You did.
Yeah, of course I did. Mum used to take me like every Saturday. They used to have like a kids club thing at the UCI at Maryhill. So yeah, I remember going to see Turner and Hooch at the cinema. I loved it. I think it was such a great film. I mean, I'm a sucker for any film with fucking dogs in, to be honest. I'm terrible for it, but I remember really enjoying that movie. And it's one that doesn't really get mentioned that much anymore compared to some of his other 80s movies. But it's a film I've always really loved. So that was my first one, would have been Turner and Hooch as well. At the other end of the scale, then, what was the last film of theirs that you saw? Stu, do you remember what the last one was?
Do we even call it a film? Otto?
I didn't know you went to see that one.
I didn't go. Well, sorry. Oh, yes, I did go to see it.
Yes, you did.
Of course I did. Yes. I have a Cineworld card. It's all exemption. I'm so glad I didn't watch it. So, just like exactly what you said. I mean, I thought, this is Andy being wrong again, and it wasn't. He was fine. Film was shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree. It was so paint by numbers. You knew exactly what was going to happen from the beginning to the very end. Even though it's based on a true story, it was just the most generic film I've ever seen. If you want to see a film like that, I just tell you, watch As Good as It Gets. That is a much better film in a similar vein.
You know what I thought when I was watching it? I thought he is playing an older version of the train conductor from Polar Express, who's old and pissed off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. Matt, are you going to make it a trio? Was Otto your last one?
Sadly not. It would have been Elvis for me. It's been that, like, in lieu of a cinema card, which will very, very shortly be reinstated. It would have been Elvis, but I'm really buzzing this week because I've got like a few spare hours here and there, so I might try and go as much as I can. And then with Super Mario coming out as well, oof,
the good stuff.
We're in heaven.
So I take it neither of you watched the Pinocchio film, the Disney Plus retelling of the
No, I heard it was that bad. It really put me off. To be honest,
yeah,
when there's the Guillermo del Toro one, which is a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece, there is no point watching any other Pinocchio thing ever again.
I still haven't got around to Del Toro. I just keep putting it off, and I know I need to sort it. I just keep putting it off for some reason. I know I need to rectify that because everyone keeps telling me how great it is. So I will change that at some point. Right, okay. Next question. What is the best performance that Tom Hanks has given in a movie? Stu, what do you think?
This is going to be really odd, but... And it's going to come back to one of the other answers later on as well. But because he's Tom Hanks, he doesn't really seem to be that good. The one that stood out, and he said best performance, was in Elvis. I thought he was fucking phenomenal. I thought that film, like we said at the time, that film was more about him than Elvis.
It was, wasn't it? It was
I
Tom
thought,
Parker's Elvis was the story, pretty much.
and take the fat suit and all the makeup and everything away. I just thought he was superb in that, and it was the first thing that came to me. And it's not the last, like we just said, it's not the last thing I saw him in. And I've only seen it once, and we saw it together. But he was amazing in it, so it's going to be Elvis.
Yeah, Matt, I imagine Elvis is probably high on your list of performances.
Yeah, it's really high up there, but I can't take away what he did in Saving Private Ryan. I think the problem with Saving Private Ryan is the whole film's problem is that the best part is the first 15 minutes. And then everything else kind of pales in comparison to the rest of the film. But as a character piece, his performance was great, and you feel. But I think Castaway probably nicks it, just because it to hold that film for the almost the entire length of it with a performance that generally hasn't got a lot to work with, quite literally, I think was a really good feat. It's not the absolute greatest film of all time, but I think as a performance to carry that film, I think it takes a certain type of actor, and I think was why it's pretty high up my list.
Yeah, to do a single-hander and it not... I'm not a massive Castaway fan, but the film doesn't sag massively when it's just him on screen, which that takes a lot of lifting from it, a solo. I mean, I suppose you can call it a two-hander if you count Wilson in that as well. But like it is, yeah, it's very impressive what he managed to achieve there. I think my answer to that, I feel like there's two Tom Hankses, because you've got the early 80s comedic Tom Hanks, which seemed to vanish pretty much at the turn of the film that I've got as his best performance, which was Philadelphia. That I feel was the making of Tom Hanks as a serious actor, pretty much. That was the time when he realised that he was very able to manipulate an audience. Prior to that, he was mostly known as, he was the straight man in comedic movies such as like Splash. I think Splash is a great film. Yeah. He's not massively funny, but the things that happen to him are funny. The way he reacts to them are really good. Like, I'd say Splash is my favourite of his comedic performances. But I thought Philadelphia was the boy becoming a man, a sort of an actor for Tom Hanks. I think that was the movie where he really managed to outshine everyone. And like Denzel was excellent in that movie. But even so, I thought Tom Hanks was brilliant. He managed to carry that really sad, really depressing film right the way through. And if I remember rightly, I should have checked this before, that was his first Oscar, or at least his first Oscar nomination, if I remember rightly. But yeah, Philadelphia for me was the performance of Tom Hanks. So what was the worst performance? What do you reckon, Matt?
I say worst because I don't think he has many like 1s or 2s or 3s out of 10. But when a film is essentially left behind on a budget, and that being the Dan Brown, like the Da Vinci Code and everything else, he's definitely done this for a paycheck. Like, I don't feel there's a lot of love in those films, to be honest. Like, I like the films because they're a bit shit, but I don't think like they're not his finest work, and it would have been at risk. It's kind of, that's verging into, let's do a film because we can keep on top and get and keep in the public eye and make a book, as opposed to wanting to make a film for the art and craft of it, I think.
Yeah, I can see that argument quite plain as day, to be honest. Stu, what do you think?
In a weird way, I'd got exactly the same thing written down, that he hasn't got a stinker. That, well, this how many is listed on here? 96 film actor credits is on IMDb. Obviously, I haven't seen them all. But in the same kind of vibe, like where you look at his recent ones, and there was one which screamed out to me. I thought, oh yeah, it's a bit like the South African thing, Finch. Shit, just shit, boring, rubbish. You might as well go. There's it. I looked at the. I didn't obviously see the trailer. Obviously, I read what it was about. Saw the poster, and I thought, well, Apple TV Plus had it because I had Ted Lasso. Why not? And I was bored. And I don't think I've even talked about it on here ever.
No,
Because there's nothing to talk about. It's just Wally, but rubbish. But again, he isn't necessarily bad in it. It's just so meh, and he doesn't contribute to it. So by default, of the ones I've seen, it has to be that. But yeah, he's never bad, which is
yeah,
annoying for this question.
yeah. I know what you mean. Like, I could probably make an argument where I completely agree with the Dan Brown films, but I've got that for one of my later questions. So I went for something slightly different. I don't think he's very good in The Terminal. I don't think The Terminal's that great a film. I didn't particularly enjoy it. It was a bit candy floss, like there was no real substance to it. And he puts on this quite shonky accent that doesn't really fit, and he doesn't embody the character like he generally does. So, like, The Terminal's in no way is it like a terrible, terrible film. It's just very middle of the road, and he feels very middle of the road in it. And he's not really a middle of the road actor, I don't think. So I feel like he let himself down with The Terminal. So that was my answer for this question.
That's fucking strike one. Just fucking putting that out there. What I will say, if this was an indie film, The Terminal, and it was some no-named actor
in
a quirky kind of role, The Terminal would have been far better received, because apart from Catherine Zeta-Jones, the cast underneath, it's not a huge. I know the Tooch is in it, but it's not a big budget. It's not Catch Me If You Can. I just think if it was just an indie sweetheart flick, it would have been much better received. I really like The Terminal, and I really liked his performance in it as well. And I think you get a lot of heart out of his character, but I could understand why it wasn't like a critical success, because it's not as the sweetest story of it is him who played Andor, and his love story, and then the story underneath of the guy who murdered a policeman who wants to stop the plane with his broomstick or whatever it is. I think that film suffers because it's not an indie darling classic. It's got a huge big budget named actor and then an indie story underneath, and that's why it suffers for it, I think.
He does feel miscast in it. He feels very out of place when you look at the rest. Because you are right, it is. When he's in something, it's a vehicle for Tom Hanks, and that film isn't a vehicle for Tom Hanks, so it doesn't work for me on that level. I think his star power just drowns the film out, and I think that's why I didn't particularly love it that much. But what is the best film that they've starred in then? For me, I feel like there's a very obvious answer, but I don't think either of you two will go for it. Matt, what's his best starring film?
It's obviously Forrest Gump.
It's not,
obviously Forrest Gump.
It's not, is it?
But it is, though, isn't it? But it is, and we've labelled this point before, but from a personal preference point of view, it's funny, it's well made, it touches on the heartstrings, it makes you laugh. It doesn't have to have sausage hot dog fingers for it to be like a good story.
No, behave.
What I'm saying, it doesn't.
Go and watch it first.
All I'm saying is we shouldn't judge a film either based on what it was at the time either, because I know that argument's about to come out, and I know, and I've got all the critique in the world. I'm absolutely fine to talk about it, but I won't be deterred by saying that this isn't a great film. But I want to know Stu's opinion on it.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's fine. I don't know. I've watched it probably a handful of times. I've never once loved this film, and I've never once hated it. I don't know why you would hate it. It's so sweet in points. It's sickening. Yeah. There's bits that are just outrageous and probably wouldn't be allowed now, but that's fine, obviously. It doesn't offend me. It doesn't do anything for me. It's just a decent film. If it was on, if it was a chance to, like tomorrow, oh, should we watch Forrest Gump tonight? Like I've been educating the 11-year-old with so far Scream 1 to 5 and The Fast and the Furious, as any sensible parent would. But if I said to him, do you want to watch, and he comes and I want to watch Forrest Gump, I go, okay, fine. And I'd prepare the whole day, and I'd look forward to it because it's been a long time since I watched it, and I don't hate it at all. It's fine. It's not his best film though. I mean, his best film is obviously. Well, I was gonna say Turner and Hooch because for the same reasons that it was one of them childhood things, but I'm going to be a basic bitch about it and say the Green Mile because I love the Green Mile as well. But Apollo 13.
I forgot he was in that.
I love Apollo 13. He's not necessarily integral to it, but as a great film, it's fucking class. It's superb. And it's, again, no one talks about it anymore. It's been so long since it's even mentioned in any kind of conversation, and I don't know why. It's not schlocky. It holds up really well. It's incredibly well made. What's not to love about it? It's just great.
I had completely forgotten about Apollo 13. That isn't on my list, but that is a good shout. That is a really good film that gets very little attention anymore. Maybe because we've seen similar films done with a better budget and better effects. So it's kind of fallen. Yeah, maybe it's just fallen to the prey of not being new and shiny anymore. So it looks a little dated, even though the story is still, at its core, very interesting and very well done. But yeah, it's a good shout, that is. Green Mile's dog shit, though. Sorry. Definitely not. Definitely not.
Strike two.
It's not dog shit. That's not right. It's not anywhere near as good as he's made out, though. It's just same as Forrest Gump. It's just a very middle of the road film that manages to play on people's sentimentality, and all of a sudden they think, "Oh, I cried at this scene, so this must be a good film." Forrest Gump to me feels like a 12-year-old's version of what an Oscar-nominated movie should be, because I was 12 years old when I saw that film. Like, I remember it at the time thinking that was really good and profound, and it's not profound at all. It's really bland, one-note nonsense. The way they treat the characters in it are fucking abysmal. The way they treat the disabled, women, black people, it's just appalling on every level. It's awful. It's not a good movie. Tom Hanks is not even very good in it. But again, I feel like this goes to my point, which I was going to mention in a little bit. The year before, when he did Philadelphia, is when he learned that he could manipulate people's emotions, and that's precisely what he does in this film. There's no artistic merit to this movie. It's just saccharine over-sentimentality. And people love that stuff, but not me. So that's why I don't enjoy that film. It's got no artistic merit. And when it comes to film, for me, artistry is like the first thing that I look for in a movie, I think.
You've never been given a box of chocolates, have you?
That's exactly it, yeah.
I remember my first day on Reddit, Andy, and I learned some opinions on there as well. But like, you talk about the treatment of the people in those films, but it was made 30 years ago, and B, it's a microcosm of the time it was in as well. And it's because people weren't treated the way they should have been 30 years ago and 50 years ago and 60 years ago when the film was set. So I don't take that. I don't think that argument really carries, to be honest, because, why don't people then criticize The Godfather for how they talk about black people or anything else? Do you know what I mean? Like, I find it really strange that the internet has this vendetta against Forrest Gump for what he should have been black. Oh, well, I don't. Why should he have been black? Educate me.
I mean, if it was made now, he'd be black. or he'd be a black transsexual now if you want to tick every box. That it's the same argument. I don't get it either. I don't get the whole hype towards it because there's so many other films that do so many more ridiculously bad things at the time that are never even talked about now. They're banned forever. Forrest Gump is still shown. It's on ITV2 or ITV4 most of the year, at least once. But no one ever talks about it, and there's never the usual disclaimer at the start saying representation of the era. Or
I just don't understand how it's become the poster for this.
Hipstery.
Okay, if you
hipsters hate it.
If you don't enjoy it as a film, that's absolutely fine. I've got no issues with like if cinematography wise or themes or anything like that. But some of the trope that I hear that comes out, which like it's people writing articles for the sake of having to write articles to look at. Like I read an article earlier today talking about how a white non-mentally challenged person should never have been able to write the role of Forrest Gump. And I'm thinking, is this serious? Like, and they were critiquing the fact that Forrest Gump invaded the personal space of the black woman on the bench, and I'm like, oh Jesus wept! Like, is this what it's come to? Like, and then he, because Forrest Gump is disabled, he can't then understand that she couldn't have worn shoes all day and not feel pain, and this is a direct attempt by the director to say that black people have higher pain receptors than white people. I'm like, this is absolute nonsense. Like, and unfortunately, then rational opinions like yours, Andy, are genuine. You know, people who have a normal sense and might sway left or right on things that we talk about get drowned out by dickheads on the internet that just make everything an absolute circus.
Yeah. It's the chronically online, isn't it? It's taking an issue and then just extrapolating it to the nth degree to the point that it becomes farcical.
I mean,
like
this is. Yeah. I mean, it's going back to it again. But like, I kind of I was kind of the last couple of weeks. I've kind of tamed myself from reacting to stuff because it was winding me up, and I thought there's no need. No one needs to hear it all the time. And I went on there, and it was trending as number 2 in the UK. Hashtag COVID is not over. It was trending number 2, and I screen grabbed it and I put it on and said, "These people absolutely love it," and they do. It's that is a perfect thing. Perfect. I've never heard that term before. Terminally online, because they are, and they absolutely. I mean, I really couldn't care less about any of this stuff. Behave yourselves. Be nice to people. Do what you want. That is it. Cast people in the right things. It doesn't matter. It's a piece of art. It's in its time, whatever. But this articles and articles and articles of different things all the time, every day. It's like as soon as the headline is hinting at stuff like that, I just don't read it anymore. Just it's the best thing. It's the best thing to do. Just ignore it and it'll go away because it's giving these weirdos and these lunatics kind of a rise. Because in that kind of idea, it's like saying, well, if you've got a brilliant idea about apartheid South Africa, yeah. Obviously, we're not South African. We're not black. We didn't live through that. So we can't write something and then reference it with things that actually happened and come up with an idea. So that's banned forever? Doesn't make any sense. It's a creative piece of art. It's a film. It's not a documentary. It's not real.
Yeah, that therein lies the issue. The people on the fringes generally seem to be louder than sensible voices, or they get exemplified and just given the oxygen of publicity that they don't need a lot of the time, and it drowns out actual discourse about stuff.
And this is what happens when we talk about Forrest Gump again.
Yeah. But Forrest Gump does seem to be an epicenter for that discussion, to be fair. And I agree, I don't really understand why. When you look, there are definitely worse films that have got much worse representations. Crash, not Sexy Crash, the shit Crash that won the Oscar. Like, there are definitely worse films that there are bigger conversations to have about. But I do recommend everyone watches Sexy Crash from 96, was it, Stu?
96.
The Cronenberg film?
Yeah.
Fucking great film, yeah. Right, so that was my answer. I genuinely surprised that neither of you went for Toy Story 2. It's the best film. it's one of the greatest films that's ever been made. Like that I think is probably top 3 best animated film of all time. I think that would be on the Mount Rushmore of animated films. Toy Story 2. And as much as I like 1, I think 2 is the be-all and end-all when it comes to the Toy Story franchise. Absolutely superb. The heart in it, the bromance between himself and Buzz that carries the whole story through. It's fantastic. I absolutely love Toy Story 2. Matt, you're shaking your head.
It's no Wreck-It Ralph, is it? Let's be honest.
I do like Wreck-It Ralph. To be fair.
You wouldn't have Wreck-It Ralph without Toy Story 2, though. That is the point. And I can't really say anymore. I mean, I've watched it so many times over the last 12 years that it's like they all just blend into one now. Apart from 4, obviously, because I'm not mad. But the last 10 minutes of the third film is unmatched with anything in any film ever. That is a fact. 2 probably is the best out of the 3 of them, not counting 4. But no, I think it's overkill for me now. I've gone too far for rational thought of saying how good it is or not, because when it's on, and I'll never not enjoy watching it. So it's one of them.
Yeah, completely agree. I'd imagine that'd probably be like right in your wheelhouse, Matt, of like, when was Toy Story 2, 97, was it 98, something like that? So I imagine it would have been like prime audience age for you.
You'd have thought so. But thanks to some inappropriate parenting, that was when I was watching like The Crow and stuff like that. So like, I genuinely like didn't see those until like way later on. So, yeah, obviously, I think probably by some kind of bias to have like, though that, well, it's not though, is it? Because Paddington 2 is not animated all the way through. But I don't think many people in the world would put any kind of animated film as the greatest. I think there's probably a bias. That's probably like a bias in Hollywood and unconsciously that animated films can't be the greatest, maybe in my mind. Whereas actually the Pokemon movie is a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. The first one.
I've only seen Detective Pikachu.
Oh, yeah.
It was quite good. That's all I've got to say on that, to be honest. I have no other knowledge about that series. So what's the worst film that they've starred in? Stu?
Cloud Atlas. Absolute wank. Nothing else to say. When you've got... I mean, it's 10... Was it 10 years old now? 11 years old, something like that? I did think, was it released at the wrong time? And like Matt's mentioned with Sausage Hands again, if Everything Everywhere All at Once can win Oscars, would it get any kind of appreciation now? And no, because it's shit. Mm-hmm. So there we are.
Yeah, that's my answer as well. It's fucking 3 hours long. It is such a mess of a movie. Like, maybe they could have turned it into a TV series. Maybe. I don't think I'd have watched it if they had done, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, as a film, it was shit. So I completely agree.
It seems like you know them things they used to do on Sky a few years ago, where they had like a Christmas, like a Christmas like 2 or 3 hour special, like split in parts. It feels like that mashed together.
It is. It's just so incoherent, isn't it? There's no real through line to it. It's dreadful. Matt, what are your thoughts on Cloud Atlas, and what is the worst film he's been in?
Well, it's 3 for 3 because it's too long, it's too confusing. It's just not a very. And if one of the questions was the biggest like dropping of the ball, it would have been Cloud Atlas as well, because it's everything that should be right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It should be amazing. And I'm not just saying it because of the Wachowskis either. It just should have been amazing, but it just wasn't. I'm not saying this is a bad film, but my experience of this film is I really don't like Splash. It's just, it falls into, can I tell you what it is? It falls into, I went to uni, I studied film studies at uni, shock. And because I had nothing to, I didn't want to go to work, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I studied film studies like everybody else that studies film studies. And I went to, I just clung on to like people that were a lot older than me when I went. People on the course were older. There wasn't many that were my age, and they were obsessed with The Breakfast Club, Splash, Labyrinth, and basically 80s films.
The good ones.
I think I just had this like unconsciously, this is shit and you're old. like mentality about it, and Splash just kind of falls into that. Like I don't think it's one of those Sunday afternoon films that you've got to. This is going to like be a really weird comparison, but it just like reminds me and has a feeling of like Heartbeat about it.
How dare you?
It's just there on a Sunday, and you've kind of got to stomach it, and then you've got to then go to school in the morning. Oh, yes. It's just part of the depressing thing that was a Sunday afternoon, and that's Splash for me.
Well, to be fair, all the things that you just listed and Heartbeat, I love all of them. So it is a perfect analogy.
I always liken that to the Antiques Roadshow feeling. I know the Antiques Roadshow. Even now, I'm like, I've got to have a bath. I've got to get to bed early because it's school tomorrow. That is how I always feel when I hear that theme tune. So I completely get your feelings on that one.
Another a couple more shows that make that list. One was Fat Friends, and the other was Cold Feet. But Cold Feet was all right. But
I think Cold Feet, you needed to be there from the start, because I had this with. I tried to get Annabelle to watch it, and you try and watch it now from the start. It really has aged badly, like Friends has. If you watch it as a newbie, which is weird to even think about. If you were there from the very start when it aired, and it was like, I remember it not being compared to Friends for a few years either. It was just its own thing to start with. That was, what was that other one with? There was a UK Friends. I can't remember what it was called.
Was it the one with Andy Lincoln in?
Yeah. That's the one.
Was it Teachers? Was it?
Teachers? Yeah, Teachers existed. Yeah, I remember that. It was okay. That was, I think.
But it wasn't Friends, was it? And Cold Feet was just because Helen Baxendale's in both of them. I think that's when it started being compared.
I remember that.
But it was never the same. It was a humorous drama. That's what it always was. And if you go into Cold Feet thinking it's a comedy, you're going to be disappointed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I get you. So 3 for 3 on Cloud Atlas. I'm kind of surprised at that. It's got a 7.4 on IMDb, so there is clearly a market for it. But yeah, I completely agree. Anyway, what role should Tom Hanks have been cast in? What role pick a film that has been done that you think he should have been in it. Matt, what do you think?
It's really tough, this, because Tom Hanks is Coca-Cola, he's a huge name, and he's like one of the names, but that doesn't always like mean you want Coca-Cola. I'm not sure if he'd have worked in this, but it's what I would want to have seen, and I would want to have seen him as the main character in Falling Down. Because I think he's like the nation's sweetheart in a way, and everybody sees him as kind of like the Dave Grohl of acting, like a really super nice guy, and he's like a super reliable pair of hands, that actually he would have been a more realistic person to have been that 9 to 5 tied on up to 11 person that then could have then flipped out and would have made that transformation that bit more dramatic, I think, and would have given him an opportunity to show his acting chops in a way that you don't see very often with him.
That's a really good one, actually, yeah. And yeah, referring to him as Coca-Cola is perfect for him, because he's the classic actor of it, isn't he? He's not like a young rock star style Pepsi. He's Coca-Cola. That's the perfect description for him.
Like it's in the Simpsons movie when he appears and he says, you know, I'm here to like take some shine off the fact that Springfield has been covered in this dome, like to take your eyes away from it. He's the salesperson. He's the reliable pair of hands. But that's why I think he would have been perfect in Falling Down, because actually at the start, Douglas's character is there to represent the man.
Mm.
And he could have done that really well, but then actually to have then seen him out of his comfort zone and doing the fucking madman side of things, I would have been really interesting to see.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So, like, because the reason I was going to say, I think he could have worked quite well in Shawshank, either in like the Robbins role or the Freeman role. I think he could have done either of those as a young man or as the man he is now. I think you could put him in there, but that just feels very safe because that's kind of what he does anyway.
Mm.
So what I feel that I'd like to see Tom Hanks do now, so I'm thinking what he should be casting. I feel like they missed a boat not having him in the original Ghostbusters. I'd really like to see him in the sequel that's coming out. I feel like he could be a replacement for one of the guys who's a Ghostbuster. I feel like he's like, had they recast the Ghostbusters in the 80s, if whoever wasn't available, Tom Hanks would have been the perfect stand-in for them, apart from Winston for obvious reasons. So I think I'd quite like to see him in Ghostbusters. It would be a bit of a return to his roots of that 80s comedy that is the Tom Hanks that I really like. So I think that put him in that, and I know it's not a film it's one that's coming up, but I would have loved to see him in that. I looked at the cast earlier, though, for the next Ghostbusters film. James Acaster's in the next Ghostbusters film.
Is he?
He is, yeah. He doesn't have a character name. I'm really kind of shocked at that. So, yeah, it looks like he's going Hollywood, which is pretty cool. Stu, what would you like to have seen Tom Hanks casting?
In a similar kind of way from that, really, because of something that I put, again, caveat, not seen all of them, but I haven't seen him in something like Jigsaw.
Okay.
Has he ever done anything evil and bad and psychotic? I don't think so, and definitely not to that extreme anyway. But to play someone like that, who's manipulative, who's evil, who's a killer, who's able to do that kind of thing. Obviously, we've seen him. He's got the ability to play someone who's died and that kind of thing. Obviously, bread and butter. But to play a maniac, completely different. I can't remember ever seen him do that. So for that reason alone, I'd like to. Just out of curiosity, I'd like to see if he could do it.
It's an interest. I'm just looking through his IMDb list to see if there's anything similar. I haven't seen Road to Perdition.
No, it's not really.
That's one that's on my list to watch, but I've never got around to. But I know it's a gangster film, isn't it? If I remember rightly, but I didn't know if that was it. So okay. What role then should Tom Hanks have passed up on? Stu?
Castaway. I really don't like Castaway. It's silly. It's silly nonsense film, and I think if this is kind of influenced by the Mighty Boosh episode, I don't know, but I can never get it out of my head, and I couldn't at the time either, and it just felt like he was completely out of place, which I know is completely the opposite of literally what I've just said, but it was like, well, Cage could have played that role. You could have got a number of people to play that role. It just seemed very strange getting him to do it when he was still Tom Hanks on an island. It was still him. There was nothing. I know you said about it was a good performance and everything, and yeah, fine, it was. But it was still him, and he was still kind of in that kind of Tom Hanks dome of things, which was just odd. And I thought, well, is it any different? And I know I'm going to get destroyed again. Fine. I just don't like Castaway.
It's fair, to be honest. I'm not a huge fan either, but I think that's kind of expected, isn't it? Matt, your rebuttal?
Listen, it's horses for courses. That's why I put it as his as performance and not best film, because like I said, I don't think it's a great film, but I think the feat to be able to carry a film on your own and it not be dog shit should be rewarded.
That's fair. So, what role do you think he should have passed up on?
It's a tough one. This I ended up going with The Lady Killers. I don't know if you've seen it.
Unfortunately.
Well, yeah, it's just, and I don't know if this is because it's like when you hear Cohen, you expect quality. I think a lot of the time, and because it wasn't, and I think there was a point this was a point in the career of Hanks where it could have kind of gone either way, really, where a couple of bad films, like you look at the films around the time. So you had The Terminal after The Road to Perdition, but Castaway was behind him at this point. Green Mile was behind him. Toy Story 2 was behind him at this point in time, and then after this, you didn't really have anything that was major until. So he's in the Polar Express, he's in Da Vinci Code, shite. Barely, doesn't appear in the Simpsons movie apart from a voiceover. Angel and Demons, shite. Then he does the stuff with the Pacific. It takes ages before he gets back into something like actually meat on the bone, decent in like Captain Phillips. And I think,
that was good.
If this was any worse, Tom Hanks' credibility could have really have been damaged for him to have no longer have been seen as like an A-lister star.
Yeah. I think what didn't help me is I'd seen the original Lady Killers literally like a week or so before seeing the remake. So by comparison, it was even worse. I have seen it again since, and it doesn't stand up at all. It's so bad, and he's so badly miscast in it. It really stinks. The one I've gone for, though, would be Robert Langdon in the Dan Brown films. I had to double check. I have seen Angels and Demons, and I've seen Inferno. It's only the Da Vinci Code, which I fell asleep halfway through. And I only watched the other two films sort of against my will. I didn't want to watch them. They were absolutely terrible movies. And he doesn't feel like Robert Langdon. Robert Langdon sort of feels like Harrison Ford. And not like young, sexy Indiana Jones Harrison Ford. Like grumpy, old Indiana Jones Harrison Ford. It doesn't quite work for him, and he feels very out of place. He's a little bit too clean cut and a bit too clean shaven to be someone who's supposed to be a bit of a maverick archaeologist, and he just feels really out of place. And they're all really bad films as well, which does not help the case for him. So I think he should have just completely left the Robert Langdon alone. It didn't work for him.
You know what? What I expected to have said if we'd have said this 5 years ago would have been Sully, which I thought that is a bad idea. Like when he was cast in that, and I thought no, it's not going to work. And actually, despite the fact that we all know that everyone knew that story anyway, and I was just looking, and it wasn't even a handful of years away from it happening for the film to come out.
And it wasn't, was it? It was like, wasn't it 2 years or so in between? It was something ridiculous.
So for it to come out and for him to play it really well, like when you said that about Captain Phillips, it reminded me. Then I thought, oh, that's a good film. But then I thought, oh, what was the other name of the captain? And it's obviously Sully. That should have been, to all extents and purposes, been the one that you said, well, that was a failure, but it really wasn't. It was really good. Really strange. And there's no real reason why, because everyone knew the story. It was like what we talked about with World Trade Center last year, where it was still in recent memory, and then it wasn't about the World Trade Center anyway. Whereas Sully was more about the person, obviously because everyone had seen the incident that happened at the end. But this worked. So, very well done.
It's one I hadn't even thought of for a while, to be fair. Another one that I thought was a really good film that I haven't managed to fit in on this. Either of you seen The Post?
No.
It was Oscar nominated a few years ago with Meryl Streep. That was really good. I'd recommend that one. I do like a US covering up of Watergate scandal kind of a film, though. So like All the President's Men, it's that kind of a film. So if you like that, I think you'd probably like The Post. It's worth watching. Moving on, though. So the next question is, as an actor, what is it you like about Tom Hanks? What does Tom Hanks bring to the table? Stu?
Professionalism. You know exactly what you're going to get. No pissing about. A very, very good 8 out of 10 on the whole. 8 out of 10, stellar performance, serious role, every box ticked, no dramas. That's what you're getting. And you look down that IMDb list, and the vast majority of them, that's what you get as well.
Mm.
And like we were saying earlier, it's like, where are the bad ones? There is no bad ones. Like bad, like 4s and 3s and 4s. They don't exist because he's so consistently just very, very good. And if you want an 8 out of 10, you don't want any messing about. You don't want any dramas. You give it Tom Hanks, and you know what you're getting when you watch one of his films. It's not going to be amazing. On the whole, it's not going to be. There's not going to be CGI all over the place, apart from Cloud Atlas, which is probably another reason for that film. But yeah, you know exactly what when you say Tom Hanks, you know the kind of film you're going to get, and I think there's something to be said for that when it's at the level that he's at. Like when you say, "Oh, Adam Sandler," that could be fucking anything. It could be the funny stuff. It could be the really, really bad stuff. It could be Uncut Gems, which I have seen now. Which, yes, I agree, great. You don't know. You've got no idea. With Tom Hanks, the vast majority of it is 8 out of 10.
Mm. It's interesting you say you don't get any drama with Tom Hanks. I'm trying to think, has there ever been a controversy involving Tom Hanks?
There was the whole Epstein plane thing that has been now fact-checked as incorrect.
Mm.
And there was the bit where...
That's a stretch, isn't it? I mean, that linked him, but as you say, it didn't turn out to be anything.
The only thing I can think of is that bit where when Ricky Gervais went off on his rant a few years ago,
yeah,
and when the camera cuts to it, Tom Hanks, and he pulls that face. That's the only thing where you think, yeah, he doesn't like this. He's part of the crowd.
He's a lovey, isn't he? Yeah,
that was literally the only thing I could think of.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something to be said, because who else is on his sort of level? Someone like, say, Tom Cruise, for example. Like, there's plenty of shitty stories about your Tom Cruises and your likes. Even someone like Denzel, like, there is a history to him as well. But with Tom Hanks, he was the first person to get COVID. Like, that's really the only story that sort of springs to mind, that if it wasn't for him, nobody would have taken it seriously, I don't think. Like, that's pretty much it.
You compare it to Hollywood's Great New Hope and look at the fucking state that he's got himself in now, and his career's over.
Mm.
Night and day. He's only just started and it's over already.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think more people can take a leaf out of Hanks's book. Matt, what do you like about Tom Hanks?
Well,
what don't you like about him? Actually, no, that's the next question.
Well, to be fair, both of them could be the same answer, to be honest. In that he's a reliable, safe pair of hands that has an underrated comedic chops, I think. And, you know, now you shouldn't laugh at Forrest Gump. And because we now know, he was mentally, he had mental capacity issues. But take that aside, like, he has comedy chops as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that also could be said as his biggest flaw and his biggest what I don't like is he's too safe and he's too straight laced and he is Coca-Cola when sometimes you want, or I wouldn't go as far as to say he's Carling when you want a cask ale, but he's definitely I think he's a Peroni when you want something with a bit of flavour and something a bit different. You don't get that with Tom Hanks. You get Peroni, which is absolutely fine, and most of the time I fancy a Peroni, or I fancy I don't know, Biamoretti or whatever, or Madri as it is now. But sometimes you want something a bit different. You don't get that with Tom Hanks very often. He's very safe, and that sometimes it can be an issue.
Yeah. It's interesting you mention his comedy chops. I completely agree. I do think he's very funny when he's not trying to be funny. But I do find the roles where he's like outwardly trying to crack a gag don't quite work. So I don't know if you've seen his character on Saturday Night Live, David S. Pumpkins.
No.
It just doesn't work. It's not funny, and he's really trying over the top to get like giggles, and it doesn't work at all. Whereas when he's got some sort of, he's downplaying who he is as a normal bloke quote unquote, and silly stuff happens to him, he's excellent at that. He's great at reacting to the funny. He's not great at pushing the funny. So I do think that's a good point you've made, Matt.
You know, it's a great example of that. Every time he's on the Graham Norton show, every single time, because he's one of them people. Like I watch it quite a lot because I do generally like Graham Norton. I think he's a good guy, but whenever Tom Hanks is on there, it's not a full lovey show. He does seem to get involved in all the bants and everything, which not all of them do, and he's on every year. So I think for someone of that level, of that caliber, to be on there and not take themselves too seriously in certain instances when they are being themselves, I think there is something to be said about that. But again, he does that and never gets himself in trouble.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that leads on to what I like about Tom Hanks. It sounds really dismissive, but I've put his interviewing technique. So whenever you hear him in an interview, he's very knowledgeable about his character. He properly loves what he does. I don't feel like he ever gives half measures to his roles. Whenever you hear him on interviews, he knows everything about the person he's playing. And it's great to see someone who just seems to love what they do as a job. And it does almost talk you into the cinemas. I've seen more Tom Hanks films than I care to admit because I'm not a massive fan. But somehow this fucker keeps making me think, you know what, that's going to be a good film, that is. And like, they always end up being fine. They never really end up being terrible, apart from Otto, which just didn't work. But even in Otto, like, his interview made me want to see that film a lot more than the trailer did. And I think there is something to be said for that. Something to be said for an actor who loves his craft, and he clearly does. And I think that's fantastic. So what do you dislike about them as an actor, Stu?
Like Matt said, it is going to be the same. It's the lack of risk. It's the lack of, please be a psychopath. Please be something like, do something insane. Go completely like the other way and do like a slapstick comedy. Do like a spoof, which he's never done other than the SNL stuff, like you just said, which he's clearly capable of doing. He's done it before, but not in a film, really. Just do something like that, or be a horrific monster, or use some, you know what I mean? Just not be straight-laced all the time. I just think when that happens, because eventually it's going to happen. I mean, how old is he now? In his 60s, I'd guess.
Something like that. I think he was born in 1956. So, 70 nearly.
So you got to think, just do it. Just get it out the way. Just like Bad Grandpa. Just, if he did something crazy like that out of nowhere, and playing the grandpa role, obviously in that one, it'd be amazing. Like, just think of the reaction that everyone would have if Tom Hanks suddenly goes rogue in a film sense. It'd be great. But whenever you want the complete opposite of what I just said about 5 minutes ago, if you want something off the wall, if you want something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, you know he's not going to be in anything like that, which is disappointing. Because if he was in a film like that, clear Atlas aside because that's a stupid film, if he was in something like that, something that's batshit mad, playing a mad role, he'd escalate it, obviously. And we've never seen it, so we don't know.
Yeah. Matt, would you like to see him try something, and even if it just fails miserably, at least he's tried it? Do you think it's got to that point with him?
I think so. I know it's the next question, isn't it? What we would want to see him do next. And I'd like to see an out-and-out mafia, proper mobster film, not Road to Perdition. I want to see the golden age of mafia as well. Do you know what I mean? Like proper, 70s, 80s Brooklyn mafia style film, which I think would be really interesting. One of the things that I had down, that when it eventually gets remade, because nothing original can ever be cast in this world, when they eventually do he's probably missed the boat now due to age, but the English adaptation of Life is Beautiful. I think I would have liked to have seen him in that role. To challenge, to use that like natural charisma and that everyone loves him personality that I think would be really suited for that role. But I think there is also an element of if it's not broke, don't fix it as well, I guess. Like you've got your wacky out there actors that can take risks and it not damage their stock. But I think it would be a shame if you don't get the horror film out of Tom Hanks or the mobster film. Do you know what I mean? Or I think it will be a shame, but you know, it's one of the. I think as time goes on, I think he's 66 now. It's less and less likely.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at someone like Robert De Niro, for the last 20 years or so, he tried his hand at doing some more out there comedies like Rocky and Bullwinkle, which is like quite a weird thing for someone like De Niro to have done. I don't think that's damaged De Niro's stock really, because he's still the raging bull at the end of the day. Like, you know, he's got that much of a life before him that he can do these missteps that don't quite work out.
Yeah, he had hits though, like along the way still, because he still had like he was given new life with Meet the Parents and Meet the Fuckers and stuff.
I was just gonna say that.
You know, if those had stunk, it'd be a completely different story. But they didn't. Like they were actually great, and that gave him a lease then to be able to do the other stuff. I think.
That's fair. Yeah. Mine, I've got that pretty much every film since 1994 has been a version of Forrest Gump. It's a little bit like my problem with Keanu Reeves, that every character is a version of Ted. Like, there might be a cool version of Ted, it might be a sexy version of Ted, like, but he's still Ted at the end of the day. And I feel like they're all pretty much Forrest Gump, apart from in Elvis and A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which are the only two characters which are based on like real people, apart from Otto, but that was shit. They all feel like they could just be Forrest Gump. It's almost like I feel like at that point he's learned how to work an audience into loving what he does regardless of actual quality of the film. So there's just not enough variation in his work. They're all very Gumpian in whatever he does, and I don't like it. And I think it just comes down to the fact that he doesn't feel like he really challenges himself. And that's, for a guy who is at the position he's in within Hollywood, I don't know why you'd be resting on your laurels at this point. You've had some big hitters, and I just want to see him take another swing for the fence at this point now. So that's my problem. They just all feel like it's like Forrest Gump's Jacob Ladder scenario. Forrest Gump is dying, and each film that he does now is just his dream that night whilst he's passing away. So that's my problem with it. Matt, you said you'd like to see him do something gangstery in the future. Is that what you've got for the next question?
Yeah, it is. And I think I'd want to see him. I know it sounds bizarre. I just want to see him like be violent and be part of something grittier and something that because the impact of that now. I know this sounds ridiculous, and I like from an outsider looking in, but it's the equivalent of Hulk Hogan joining the NWO. But it is though, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's that eat your vitamins, say your prayers. American hero turning would just be the coolest thing if he did something like that, and that's the best thing I can compare it to. Like you just wouldn't see it coming. It would get the eyeballs watching, and it would just be excellent.
Would you want him in the Don Vito Corleone role, or would you go with one of like the minions? Do you think he'd be the big boss, or do you think he'd be one of the subs?
You know, well, my answer for what he should have been casting, it just didn't work chronologically in terms of time. He should have been the Tom Hagen, the consigliere. That's what I would have wanted him to have been, but like just when he how old he was just wouldn't have worked. But yeah, he would be kind of I'm not saying he'd be the straight man, but he'd almost be the Saul Goodman. He'd be like the shyster, that kind of role in the mafia film.
You know what? I bet he wasn't actually that old. If we looked it up and how old he was at the time he made that film, I don't think Tom would have been that old. It's just that people in that era just looked about 20 years older than they actually are.
So Tom Hanks would have been 16 when The Godfather came out. So
yeah, that's probably two.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he would have been two.
Yeah,
like because Tom Hagen was like I think he was meant to have been in like his mid-20s, early 30s. I think.
Yeah, couldn't have pulled that off. Stu, what would you like to see him do next?
Again, similar kind of thing. Either something like that or the most ridiculous. Well, even why not Human Centipede? A proper version. Something so horrible and sick that you wouldn't imagine it. Like the Meet the Parents syndrome. Like we said, we already have had that with De Niro when it kind of came out of nowhere for him to switch and do that kind of comedic thing. But he still played the straight man there, to be fair, in the most part in the first film. But yeah, just something like that, just completely out of the wheelhouse, different that we haven't had. And just go for it. Just throw his whole body into it, and it's almost a bit. I was gonna say like that wrestling analogy for normal people. It's a bit like when Dom turned rogue in Fast 6.
I'm not sure that's any more normal.
Who are these normal?
Wrestling.
The crossover within universes is probably quite high, to be fair. Yeah, I want a sick horror film from him.
That'd be interesting. My answer: have either of you two ever heard of Electric City?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a series of shorts that they were put out online by Tom Hanks. There were 20 5-minute episodes that ultimately became like a 90-minute movie. Animated film set in the post-apocalyptic world where pretty much all of telecommunications and everything has gone down and they have to try and survive. The original plan for Electric City was to be this wide, sprawling, entire universe that Tom Hanks was going to be the front of. It was going to be an animated series, a film, comic books, novels, do all of this. And the film came out, or the web series came out. It was such a really interesting, really well put together, lovely animation. And then it just vanished. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was a case of the funding wasn't there or whatever, but Tom Hanks was never able to get it off the ground and go further with it. But it was something at the time that was spoke about at great length, that it was a passion project of his. And I kind of want to see what else he would have done with it in all these other mediums. What else could he have given us? I think it'd have been really interesting. And we just never got it. We just managed to get this one 90-minute film that was good. It was a good introduction to that world. But I wanted more at the end of it, and we never got it. So I would love to see him return to that and give us something that he seems to be or was at least, passionate about.
This was referenced in one of the documentaries about Enter the Spider-Verse.
Was it really? That does not surprise me thinking about it. Look, with the
I've never seen it, but that's the only time I've heard it mentioned, and it's one of these things that was just in passing, a bit like Akira. Like everyone knows what Akira is, even if you haven't seen it. One of them kind of things. But yeah, what you've just described makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's available on the YouTubes. The whole 90 minutes film put together. It's worth watching. It's good, and I'd love to see him return to that world one day. Right, so that's the Tom Hanks special done. So next week I thought we would watch a Tom Hanks film, just to try and break it up from Cage. Originally I did think we could do a Cage-Hanks crossover. I don't think they've worked together. The only film I could find was The Ant something or other, which Tom Hanks produced, The Ant Bully.
No, that's shit, that is.
We'll watch it at some other point. Because the last animated film we watched was The Croods. I don't want to sully it with a shit animation just yet.
No, it's really bad.
Yeah. So I thought the last film that I saw of Tom Hanks that I've never even heard of is called A Hologram for the King, 2016. So I thought, well, we can watch that one and see if there's a reason why we've never heard of it before. But that is available in places. I don't even know. It might be available. I think it was. Where did I did see it somewhere, but I can't remember. No, I can't find it. Check on justwatch.com to see where it's streaming near you. I'm sure it'll be available somewhere like it usually is. Looking at the cast on this one, gents, Ben Wishaw's in it.
Yeah.
And Tom Skerritt, who was in the Twilight films. So I'm sure it's going to be brilliant. Please make sure you subscribed on whatever podcatcher it is that you're listening to us on now. And please leave us a review. We would truly appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time this week. We hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know what you think of Tom Hanks and if you've got any other answers to the questions that we've asked tonight. And for this week, Matt, would you like to say goodbye?
Well, one thing I will say, genius, much like Antonio Conte, who's just been sacked from Spurs. Sometimes even genius gets overlooked, much like Tom Hanks. Take it easy.
Stu, would you like to say goodbye?
And remember, life really is like a box of chocolates.
It's goodbye from me. And remember, be excellent to each other.
I wish I had known that this too shall pass. You feel bad right now? You feel pissed off? You feel angry?
Yes,
this too shall pass.
Great.
You feel great? You feel like you know all the answers? You feel like that everybody finally gets you, and there you are. This too shall pass.
Ooh, good.